Dr. Joy Kiru, she's an economist, and Kwame Owino, CEO, Institute of Economic Affairs. The politicians disagree on how much we even owe, but we'll find out from the experts, all right? Let's set the stage rolling. First of all, this is what really happened today. Kenya Kwanza's position is that our debt commitment is at 4.5 trillion pre-handshake. Debt commitment now post-handshake is 11.7 trillion. They go ahead and break it down. This is their breakdown here. They say that public debt right now is 11.7 trillion as of February 2022. Direct public debt, 8.2 trillion. Guaranteed commitments, 3.5 trillion. That's how they get to the 11.7 trillion. Now, on the other side, Kanini Kega, who's the chairperson for the Budgets Committee at the National Assembly, says this is the position. As of June 2013, we had 1.8, June 2018, 5.4 trillion, December 2021, 8.2 trillion, projection for June 2022 is 8.8 trillion. So is it 11.7 trillion or 8.8 trillion? And Kwame, that's where we'll start with you. Let's set the record straight. So how much do we really owe based on what you see?
Okay, I mean, because you're showing us a screenshot about, I mean, rather, the contest is how much was owed before 2018, and then thereafter. It is not possible under any mathematical figure to have had Kenya's debt at 4 trillion, because the reason the debt ceiling was extended was that the debt ceiling was at 6.5 trillion by the end of 2017. And the reason it was extended is because it was close to that. So it would have been silly for somebody to say that you're extending a debt when you still have 2 trillion difference. So obviously, I think Kenya Kwanza needs to recheck those figures. Okay. However, they have a point in the sense that the way we measure debt in Kenya, or rather conventionally, the way the Treasury measures debt, does not include what are called commitments made by government, or rather, government underwriting debt by other state corporations or even counties. The Constitution requires that those be counted, or rather that the national government actually guarantees debt by state corporations and all that. So if you put all that together, it makes it much larger than what is declared conventionally. Okay. So that's the point. But the idea that it was 4.1 trillion by 2017 is obviously just a lie or completely mistaken mathematics. It's not possible because the extension was made at the place of 6.5, 7 trillion. Okay. So at that point, it was already close to 7 trillion. And because a breach was about to happen, that's why the Treasury went in, as the law allows it to do, and Parliament approved that number. Yeah. Joy, what is your argument on this? Where are we? How much do we owe? Is it 8.2, 11?
The truth is we cannot argue with numbers. 1 plus 1 is 2. It cannot be anything else. Yeah. And we are now, if you look at the debt position of Kenya right now as we are, it's at least it is about 8 trillion. That one I'm very sure of. Okay. But just like Kwame says, the government understates the debt. There's this idea of understating how much you owe and overstating how much you can collect. That's something known because, for example, you find that the government will not count what it has guaranteed for parastatals to borrow, yet it is part of public liability. If those guys default today, all of us pay, right? The taxpayers pay. Yeah. So that is the truth. As the government will understate because of that. And of course, if you're talking about it, I think debt should all be counted as debt. Okay. And Kwame, you know, one of the biggest issues here is this issue of guaranteed debt. Yes. In fact, Kenya Kwanza says it's 3.5 trillion. That is what brings it to 11.7 trillion. Yep. But the chairperson, Kanini Kega, argues that that is never included in the debt stock of a country. Is that the position? And what is even guaranteed debt, first of all, before we get too technical? Okay, guaranteed debt is this. You know that there are big state corporations such as Kenya Airways, the Kenya, say, all these parastatals that do big dams and big projects, the Kenya pipeline, Kenya ports, those big ones. And often because they need to borrow, they sometimes don't have assets that can actually be placed as part of that. And obviously government is the biggest owner. It's government that guarantees the money that they borrow. Okay. And that's correct. I mean, it's just basically part of the assurance by whoever is going to lend them. So what that means is the public stands behind them through the Ministry of Finance, stating that, look, please lend to them, because if you do not, the guarantee is that the Republic will pay for it. Yeah. The facility that the government of Kenya has entered into with the World Bank, or sorry, with the IMF in April last year, one of the recommendations is that Kenya's debt figures should reflect all that, as Joy has mentioned.
so that we should have a debt figure that tells the truth, truth teller, saying this is what is owed and this is what the government has made commitments to. If you put it all together, this is what it's, because that gives us a clear view about to what extent the government is leveraged. Okay. So that's point. So in a way, both sides of them have an argument, but the point is Kanini Kega insists on the conventional way in which Treasury has counted it until today, and which Parliament itself has also accepted. But if you talk about to what extent the country is leveraged, the position that's actually stated by Kenya Kwanza, is it, seems to be more correct. We need to actually count all our debts together. Whether it's 3.5 trillion is a different matter altogether. We need to see that accounting. But it doesn't suggest to me that it's that large. That notwithstanding, if we say it is 8.2 trillion, actually we'd need to put together another 600 or close to another trillion shillings that is guaranteed debt for all these corporations. Some of them may eventually pay, others may not. But it's important for us to reflect the fact that the government of Kenya is leveraged in the sense that assets may have to be brought to, or taxpayers may have to pay if, for instance, Kenya Airways doesn't pay. And you know what's happening right now. 26 billion here, another 30 billion there for Kenya Airways and all these other corporations. So that's the point.
Joy, is it this part of what you're saying that we understate our debt? So should we actually just include it?
Should we?
Should we include the guarantee debt that we...
Sure. We should. I mean, if you owe, you owe. The point is, we are defining that we are spending other people's money, and this is a public parastatal, meaning that it is spending on public's account. So it's still our debt. Okay. It's still our debt before you look at it.
So somehow both sides are right. This is what...
They have a point. You know, the point is everyone just wants to take a position that favors them. Okay. You take a bit there that looks good to you and another one that looks good to you, but each of them has a point.
Okay. Kwame, let's talk about now the issues that are pressing people, and Peter Wakaba is one of them here who's saying that please start by asking Kwame to explain what is driving the high cost of living and what is driving the current inflation and sliding, or is it the slide of the dollar rate? Because that is a conversation people are having now. Okay,
fine. Let's go now to the cost of living. Now, I think we have to be careful saying that the cost of living is going up because one item that I buy, say, for instance, if I buy sugar and it's gone up, that means the cost of living is gone. Students of economics, and Joy will confirm here, measure cost of living through what is called the Consumer Price Index, which is a basket of goods which is used every year. It includes goods that people buy conventionally. And the price changes in that is what is used to actually show that the cost of living is going up. So in that basket of goods are many things, including food items, fuel, energy costs, all those things that people buy, housing, shelter, and all that. So because the biggest part of that basket, close to 40% of that basket is food items and energy, basically petroleum, transportation, and all those other things, it's been rising because first, globally, petroleum prices have been rising in the last few months. Because Kenya imports petroleum, what that means is that that price will be imported into the country regardless. So that's the first one. The second one is that the Kenya shilling has gotten a little weaker, well, quite weak between last year towards October to today. It's something like between 7% or thereabouts weaker. Because the petroleum is paid for through the Kenya, I mean, not through Kenya shillings, but it's paid for through dollars, or international currency, that would reflect in it as well. And the third one is common items such as bread, right? Rice, even maize. Kenya does not produce enough for itself. So some of them are also imported from the neighborhood. Taxes on them are high because the posture is to defend Kenyan producers. So what that means is when you import it and the taxes are high, that cost obviously is reflected. But people have mentioned something about cooking oil, which has actually had the highest cost change. Now, cooking oil is mostly made from palm oil. Palm oil comes from Malaysia. The biggest supplier globally is one of the biggest suppliers is Malaysia. Because of the effects of COVID, most farms and plantations that grow palm oil were actually closed. The workers, many of them who come from other parts of Asia, Malaysia and other countries around that area, went back home because of COVID clampdown and the closures. So the crop is available, but the harvesters are not back because borders have not been open. That means, therefore, that shortage is creating a demand. Of course, a supply-side shock, which is basically there's less than people demand, and that's leading to prices going up. That's not something government can do a lot about, except for the cost that comes from taxes and obviously the efficiencies at the port and stuff like that. So some of these things come from international markets and the realities of the international market. If you're importing things, obviously that will have the effect. So it's a mixture of facts.
Okay. Joy, would you say the government has simply mismanaged the economy?
To some extent, yes. I think as he was talking, I think he's given a very good view, a very good economics view, which is really excellent. I would like to bring in a policy perspective. Like, for example, we've all heard about Kitui is dry, Makueni is dry. Yet a few years back, like 3-4 years ago, about 3-4 years ago, we talked about the dengue revolution in Kitui, of all the places. The governor told them that he has negotiated markets in India. A kilo of dengue is going to be at 100 shillings, right? And we saw what farmers did. Farmers overproduced, then the market fell through. A kilogram of dengue went down to 20 shillings, 30 shillings, and sometimes less. If you're a farmer in that situation, would you produce more? No. My point is, incentives for farmers to produce more. That is linking farmers to markets, protecting farmers from exploitation. Those are the biggest exploitation by brokers, for example, because every time they do a bumper harvest, they end up getting even less than their production costs, while somebody else who doesn't even pick a djembe to go to the farm gets all the profits. So protection of farmers must be key. And finally, I'll give you another interesting example. I happen to work in a multidisciplinary group of scientists. We had scientists from CARO, that is the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Organization. We had plant breeders, that is people who just breed crops depending, or rather seeds rather, depending on the climate. Meaning that if they go wherever they go, they can tell you that this will do well here because of this climate and things like that. I was doing the evaluation in the team, and something came up that farmers are happy to adopt technology, and we did that. And within that pilot, where we were working in the pilot, they did very well. Then guess what? The policy lapses, access to markets. The next time we went there talking about, oh, adopt this technology, it does well, they said, for what and do what? Because they plant, but then there's nothing for them to show in terms of even that bumper harvest. There are no markets.
All right.
It's not because that we have enough, yet the cost of these things is going up, and up, because of the broker effect. Keeping the market under supply so that prices keep going up while the farmers are suffering. A policy lapse. And nobody wants to talk about those things that really are very important for us in terms of food security.
All right.
So the policy lapses really need to be addressed.
Kwame, is that your view as well? Is that where we lost it?
Well, yes. I mean, for staples, for staple foods, where we're talking about especially cereals, rice, maize, and wheat, Kenya doesn't produce enough. So, for instance, wheat, 80% of Kenyan wheat, which is used into bread, which is processed into bread, is actually imported. And when that happens, it means that keeping high tariffs, which make it expensive in the first place, is going to affect us. So, yes, there's a place for science and there's a place for research to enable production to work well. But my view about agriculture and food security is that, look, agriculture is not only about farmers. It's about consumers as well. And consumers need fair prices too. So if we can make agriculture work in such a way that producers have to compete, and at the same time farmers get a fair wage, then obviously that's a useful one. The nature of agriculture, however, and I think that's an important thing about storage. The nature of agriculture is you sometimes have those bumper harvests, and those cycles allow for exploitation, sometimes by middlemen. I don't think middlemen are necessarily bad, but they're actually people who sometimes cover a gap in such a way that they can take advantage of those differences and shifts and all that. So yes, market information and all those other things can be resolved through policy questions. But if you look at maize, for instance, maize farmers 80% of people who grow maize in Kenya actually do not grow enough to sell. They grow because they have small farms, and then they buy off the markets.
Okay.
So therefore, high prices doesn't help them. But we have some of the highest prices in this region for maize because a few people, again, it's a political and policy decision, a few people who produce the biggest harvests. While maize comes in from Uganda for 1,200, we insist that maize cannot be sold for less than 2,000 shillings because it makes certain farmers richer. So those are some of the political fixes that we need. But yes, I think agriculture is not just complex, but the truth is we need to balance the interests of consumers on the one side, who are the ones buying food and complaining today, and the farmers on the other. As it is right now, both sides are unhappy, and that's a big problem.
All right, let's bring up some of the feedback that is coming through on Twitter. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. We'll also get into your video questions in just a bit. Let's bring up the first one. Wanyonyi Phil says, as an economist, I don't infer the problem of increasing cost of living to high taxes. Why should a liter of milk go for 45 shillings from a milk vendor and the same milk bought at 120 shillings in supermarkets? Only packaging and storage? Does that make a difference? Dr. Joy?
No. The point, the thing is, some of these things, if you talk about monopolies, milk market is more or less like a monopoly. And if you talk about one large supplier controlling the market, that is what you see. That kind of farmers getting little and somebody getting more than double what a farmer is getting. Is it even moral to begin with? I don't know. I don't know. The person who is really sweating hard to produce is getting less than half of what you are getting for just a little bit of processing, not even complete because it will still go bad after some time. But really, I think we need to think in a very moral perspective. I mean, business ethics.
Okay. So the problem is monopoly.
Yeah, the monopoly, yes. But monopolies operate like that. If only we can make the market a little bit much more competitive by removing monopoly power in the dairy market, I think we can all be happier. The farmers will be happier and the consumers will be happier because like he said right now, none of us is happy. The farmers are not happy. The consumers are not happy. It is these guys in between
who are happy.
Is that moral? I don't know.
All right. Let's bring up the next one here. Okelo Mwalimu says, to remedy current economic hardships, all concerned parties, including politicians, must engage in honest and deliberate discussions aimed at reinvigorating economy. For instance, how can we revive collapsed industries? What fiscal policies can Parliament prioritize? But Kwame, you touched on this issue of reviving collapsed industries and you gave KQ as an example, being pumped in more money. Could that be a solution? Reviving collapsed industries?
Okay, it depends on the reason for which it collapsed. I mean, if you look at some of the industries, so for instance, Kenya has the most expensive sugar, the most expensive maize in this region. I don't think that's just for consumers, and especially since most farmers don't make that much money as well. I don't think that's just. So reviving sugar companies, I don't think we should accept sugar companies as a lost cause, I think. We should accept some of those sugar companies as a lost cause. If sugar globally is 38 shillings a kilo, in Kenya, it's 90 or thereabout per kilo, and yet farmers still have not been paid. So it means we are simply supporting some manufacturing plant that is very inefficient and its suppliers who supply big stuff in it. So I think we need to be able to just say that, look, just every collapsed industry is also a signal from the market that the market is not, that the consumers are not pleased with what it is supplying, and therefore let it collapse. I know Kenyans have a big view about people who import sugar, cheap sugar, and all those things. As a consumer, I want cheap sugar. I'm not going to lie that we must have expensive sugar so that somebody else can make a lot of money, and yet I have little money to buy. So the truth is there's no quick fix, but there are some industries in Kenya for which maybe we should accept them as lost causes and reinvest that money if they must be, allow for new and more productive industries to take place. So if you have the best tea in the world, and for that reforms and everything is being made, why should we accept a laggard like sugar for 60 years and that's not been doing well? Part of it is actually to accept how do we redirect these resources to do something that's better as well, so that competition works and obviously consumers can get the best prices that's available. Okay,
interesting perspective. Dr. Kiru, should we just leverage on our strongholds, but what is the space for
I tend to, much as I respect his views, it makes sense like this very interesting trade theory. Actually, it's on point in terms of trade theory, in terms of inefficiencies in production. Yeah. Just go to wherever it's efficient and gives you better prices. But for me, I have much as I agree with this view, I have a different opinion. I refuse to give up. I refuse to give up because we can fix production incentives and deal with people who are mismanaging these industries. Why is it that people mismanage industries and they use that money to run for political offices to defend themselves or to acquire more power to keep swaying the ant of justice? Why are we letting people run down our parastatals? Why are we letting people run down our factories? Why are we letting just a few people run down manufacturing sector? The law should we should strengthen institutions and strengthen the law and name and shame such individuals. It's a high time we shifted our culture. We know that so-and-so ran down a particular industry. And we want to elect him in a political position so that he can acquire more power to keep protecting himself, protecting his worth. Come on, Kenyans. He's not defending us. He's just selfish in the most possible way that you can ever think about. Okay. I refuse to give up on this, and I think the law should take its course, strengthening institutions until we such culprits.
Kwame doesn't seem to agree.
No, I do. I mean, I think, look, there's never, under no circumstances should we say that somebody who's stealing public money or mismanaging public resources should be let go. Yeah. That's definitely not it. But I'm saying that Kenyans have been pushing for the sugar industry in Kenya to wake up, especially those that are owned by the public sector, for long. And if you look at the amount of money that's been sent to them, I actually think that's something that the government did. The government there's a precedent. I think in the late 90s, we had the same problem with tea, for instance. And what did the government do? Government told farmers, fine, if you guys want to keep these industries, run the factories. Now, of course, there's politics that's come in more recently, but run the factories. And farmers did it. So if we come to a place where we think that, so for instance, I just give the example of sugar, which is one of the more problematic and very political crops in Kenya. Ask farmers, if you people want to run it, there's no reason why we should subsidize 400,000 farmers from the sweat of 40 million Kenyans. If you people want to run it, we can give you the factories in the same way that tea factories were given over to the farmers. And you guys do your best with it. If it works, the better. But you cannot keep an industry forever subsidized, but the farmers don't receive payments 2 years later, they haven't been paid. And whenever government provides a subvention, the first people who get their money paid for them are, suppliers who supplied factors completely unrelated to the crop and stuff like that. So yes, there must be definitely, and whoever is taking public money or mismanaging a farm should be held accountable for it.
Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, Kikuyu Member of Parliament, says, I fully concur with Dr. Joy Kiru. The milk prices are largely driven by monopolistic cartels that are anchored and ably facilitated by state capture. President Kibaki left us with a functional KCC and dairy processors almost in every county with good milk production. But what about today? But what I find interesting is some of the members of Parliament had the power to change all these things, but they don't talk about it much then. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the point. I think there's a lot of responsibility that is laid at the hands of the executive. I'm talking about the presidency, the treasury, and all that. The damage that has happened to the Kenyan economy in the last 7.5, 8 years was not possible without Parliament allowing it. It would not have been possible without Parliament actually allowing that to happen. So while Kimani Ichung'wah is right, a monopoly in any part of the economy is usually dangerous for the reasons that we see. Milk is sold at 35, packeted quickly and half a pint. By the time it gets back to the shelves, it's twice as much, and the margin that is picked by the processor is huge because a monopoly has been put in place. So that's something that Parliament has the power to fix, by simply saying, look, we have a Monopolies Commission. The Monopolies Commission should examine whether this position is actually a reason naturally, or it's a reason because of pressure on farms to sell or pressure on farms to consolidate and that. If it is a reason naturally, then that's it. If it hasn't, then Parliament has a reason, as a way to actually fix it, because the laws allow for that to happen. So when Kimani Ichung'wah mentions that, he's mentioning one half and forgetting the other side of the coin. Parliament has a role with the laws that are available, including passing other laws if they think that is what fixes it. So,
Dr. Kiru, can we absolve any of them from this? Because now there's a push and pull that the opposition failed to check government. So it's like someone saying that I failed to do my job because you failed to check me. But then also they were in the August House. Can we absolve any side from blame?
Oh, Trevor, politics is a dangerous game, and I'd like to keep my heart as a professional when I'm on this table, because really it's a murky affair. But the point is, everyone has a responsibility to do their job. If you are in any position of power in public office, it's about altruism, service of the country before service of self. That's the oath of office. And anybody who goes against that, who wants to serve themselves first, is culpable. And even those who are paid to go and check those who are supposed to be doing the job, and for some reason, I don't know what happens in there, they get compromised one way or another. They are equally culpable. So the point is, when people fail to do, when people in economics you talk about utility maximization, which is just something about satisfying your what serves you best. As a public office, you have two functions. There's what serves the country and what serves you as an individual. And sometimes, unless there are proper rules, regulations, strong institutions, you start pursuing that which serves you more than you are pursuing that which serves the public. And that is what we are seeing in Kenya. That is the individual utility is taken much more seriously than the public utility.
So, Kwame, is it an issue of policy gap or institutions not doing their job? Because Daisy Amdanyi here says, don't forget that we have a competition commission that is supposed to check monopolistic companies.
Yes. Let's, Trevor, if you allow me, let me go back to the question since Joy wants to. Yes, I think, let's say this. Kenya is a republic. And being a republic with a constitution, it has set up responsibilities for every arm of government. There's nothing in the Kenyan constitution that says that whoever people call the elected, the opposition, there's none. The only thing that our constitution recognizes are the three arms of government. So the rest of us, whether you call him the official leader of the opposition, which does not exist in the constitution, is a citizen just like Joy and myself. And we might want to wade into the questions of public affairs or not. The real check on the executive in Kenya, because of the three arms of government, is Parliament through its lawmaking and oversight roles and representation, and the judiciary by deciding whether the laws that have been passed are correct. This idea that there's somebody sitting out there, usually people think it should be some old man who's been in Kenyan politics for 30 years, is supposed to be some opposition, is just the nonsense of Twitter and the backpassing of Parliament when it has refused to do its work. There is no role that anybody who has not been elected, and especially if they've lost an election, owes us to check the government on our behalf. It's nonsense. The Constitution states very, very clearly, Parliament can check the executive in many ways. Passing laws, controlling the budget, and having oversight about how the president and the executive does their job. There is no role there except for making press statements for somebody who lost an election or a busybody like myself or somebody else. We have to stop lying to Kenyans that there's somebody called the opposition head who's supposed to be looking out there to ensure that the president spends our money well. That's nonsense. That's the role of Parliament. And if we think there's been a gap, let's ask ourselves why Parliament has not done it well.
Okay. And that case, let me take a quick break here. When we come back, there's still a lot of Twitter questions and also videos coming through. I'll post some of them to my guests in just a bit, all right? See you shortly.